Maybe for some reason you want to try this whole cool ZFS thing everyone keeps talking about.
ZFS.
Okay, ZFS, however you want to put it. But you know, the current installer, how difficult is that to do? Do you have some issues installing ZFS? Yeah, it's kind of a pain in the rear. So maybe this would be something easier we can fix for you here. So right now there's two ways to accomplish this. The first, write your own installation scripts. Lots of fun. You can configure all the network booting by hand. Again, lots of fun. And then you can maintain it forever, or as long as you're going to be using it, which, lots of fun, right? So when would you want to consider doing that? Well, you want to configure everything by hand, which sometimes there's good reasons for that. Or you're just a FreeBSD god, which, again, congratulations, but for the rest of the world, it doesn't work out so well. When to not consider solution number one. You know, manual disk partitioning isn't your thing. You're not really a big fan of Gpart and figuring out sectors and where I want to deploy this and that. Just no good. Or you actually have a job and work for a living and need to get other work done in the meantime. So maybe number one's not going to work for you. So solution number two, and what I'm going to be talking about today, is using the utility we've developed for PC BSD called the PC Thin Client. And it is pre-installed on both PC BSD and TrueOS, which is our server version of PC BSD. When should you consider this solution? You don't enjoy disk partitioning, and you want to have a weekend, which is what I'm all about. Because if I'm working on Saturday, that's a fail. So first of all, I'm just going to define a couple terms that I'm going to be using throughout this talk. And I know these are accurate because I took them from Wikipedia. So PXE, the pre-boot execution environment. PXE, also known as pre-execution environment, sometimes pronounced PXE, is an environment to boot computers using a network interface independently of data storage devices like hard disks or installed operating systems. Whoever wrote that did a good job. And then NFS is going to be the other thing we're using today. Network File System, Distributed File System Protocol, originally developed by Sun Microsystems in 1984. Wow, it's been a while. Allowing a user on a client computer to access files over a network in a manner similar to how local storage is accessed. We're going to be using both of those extensively today. So, what are we going to need to get this started? Well, first we're going to need a system, of course, with a network interface. I put 2 in parentheses there because there's a good reason sometimes to have a second network interface in that box, which I'll get into here in a little bit. It'll need to be running PCBSD 9.1 or TrueOS 9.1, and you'll need to have at least a few gigabytes of free disk space so you can store images and whatnot. So getting started. Getting this deployed is actually really easy. I'm just going to kind of walk you through it. Again, I want simplicity, so it's not going to be a lot of technical stuff here to get this running. On TrueOS, we're just going to need to fetch the FreeBSD port street. So port snap, fetch, extract, update, whatever. You know, some variety of that command, or if you want to pull from SVN, go for it. On PCBSD, we have an easy way to do this. You just click the control panel, click the system manager, tasks, and then fetch ports. It'll do all that stuff in the background for you. So if you're too lazy to be bothered to remember the command, that's the way to roll. So getting started, after you've gotten your port street extracted and ready to go, we're just going to run one command, the PC Thin Client command. You'll just need to bring up a root prompt on whatever system you're using and type that. And it will start a wizard which is going to set you up. The first thing it's going to ask is, do you really want to do this? Make sure you didn't type it by accident. So we're going to go ahead and hit yes. And it's going to go ahead and ask a question to get started. Do you want to make this a remote X desktop server or an install server? And they're both similar in a few different ways. But in this case, we're doing an install server. But I do want to make a detour here just to explain what the other option is really quick, because I know I'm going to get asked if I don't answer. What is the remote desktop feature? Well, the Thin Client utility can operate both as the install server, which primarily we're looking at today, or a desktop server. The remote desktop server is going to allow you to boot diskless clients via PXE, and after they boot, they're just going to drop right to the GDM login prompt. You know, for all intents and purposes, a desktop. So why would you want to run that? Well, say you have a bunch of low-end clients with no hard drives, a bunch of old 32-bit machines or something laying around collecting dust, and you need to deploy new workstations for the secretary or somebody in the office or anybody who just needs access to web, email, and you don't mind doing that over a network connection. Another good reason is we've had people say, oh, I want to be able to simplify my backup, my security, my management. I don't want to have 30 workstations in my office that I have to go and patch and do this and do that and worry about somebody breaking an application. You just have it on one box. It's easy to back up. You can get a pretty beefy system with a bunch of mirrored drives and go to town. That's a pretty attractive solution in some cases. So why would you not run this though? Well, maybe you don't have a server with the horsepower. You know, if you're going to be having 30 clients connect, you may have a whole bunch of different things running on that system. You're going to need some memory, disk space for everyone's files. So that's something to consider. Right now, also sound support. We do not have any sound support on the client. So you'll be getting X and video and all that, but we're not streaming any audio to the client system. That may change in the future as I get time to sit down and work on that. There's a few ways to accomplish it. So now we'll go ahead and actually dive back into the installer though. So we've already picked that we want to deploy an installation server. It's going to go ahead and prompt us what network interface do we want to listen on. This is going to set up your DHCP server, which is going to be handing out IP addresses. Be careful which cable you plug into this. There's some good reasons for that, which I'll get into in a moment. And then that's it. We've asked maybe 3 or 4 questions. Based on that, it's going to go ahead and set up everything for you. It's going to set up NFS on the system. It's going to set up inetd for TFTP and some other nifty things. It's going to set up DHCP for you, and then it's going to say, you're done. That was it. We've managed to set up a PXE booting server in about 30 seconds, I'd say. Very quick. Again, I don't like doing things too technical because I'm lazy. I just want to hit enter a couple times and go. So now we're ready to roll. We can go ahead and connect a client system and start PXE booting. So to PXE boot, you may need to check the BIOS on your client first, make sure it's set to boot up off the network interface. Some network interfaces may not have the PXE boot support, so that's something to keep in mind as well. And now I actually get to show you what this looks like. Give me a second here. So first thing, this is the actual host running. We'll take a look here. Let's see, I have DHCP, configs, etc. It went ahead and set up all that for me. So the client took care of all that for you. You don't have to know the gory details if you don't care to know them. Hop back here. And now boot up client. Okay. So, again, this was maybe I've put 5 minutes of work into all this so far to set up an installation server, and now I'm already ready to roll and start booting clients. So we'll give that a second, and I'll show you what it looks like when the client finishes booting. That's that. This is all running on a True OS box. Okay, set up this PXE client there. Great. So it goes ahead and brings me to a dialog screen where I only have a few options. So one of the first options, of course, is install, and I'll show you that in a second. But we also have an emergency shell. And I wanted that because this was a great way for me to go, oh man, I really screwed up my ZFS pool or something. I can plug in, bring up the shell, and go fix things at the command prompt. So very handy for emergency repairs. But in the case of installations, which is what I want to do, I can say, let's do an install here. And it's going to give me a list of installation scripts I have sitting on the server. So this, in this case, I only have one example. That's what comes with the software. I can just go ahead and say, hey, let's do this. It's going to confirm. Do you want to run this installation? Yes, and off it goes. My installation is now running on the client hard disk. So I'm going to show you in a little bit here how we create other installation scripts, how you would manage those. But you could just put 100 scripts in there and give them whatever name you want, and they'll show up in the menu, so your tech or you or whoever's doing it can just arrow through them and say, I want that script, I want this config with this ZFS on my box, and it goes. So in this case, it's doing a quick UFS installation. This is actually running the PC sysinstall backend, which is the default installer on PC BSD in TrueOS. It's not the FreeBSD. BSD installed a new one in 9.1. This one is one that I wrote years ago, and it supports all the ZFS features, and it's all 100% scriptable, similar to how old sysinstall was, kind of similar syntax. And we'll show you that here in a second. So, okay, it's going ahead and extracting some tar archives and just splatting FreeBSD on that box. Should be done here in just a second. While I wait for that, is there any questions? I don't mind answering questions while we're in the middle of it, so feel free. Yes?
Is there a way to, so like using the MAC address of the machine to pre-select
Yes.
a install script?
So the question was, using the MAC address of a client, for example, is there a way to pre-select the install script? Yes, there is. In the PC sysinstall backend, I have a way to go ahead and grab the MAC and say, run this script on it. You can upload a configuration and give it the MAC address as the file name. And it'll look and go, oh, found a match, boom, let's go ahead and deploy it. All right, so my installation is now finished here. Yay, we're done. You can see that was a whole FreeBSD install, took just a few seconds. We'll go ahead and reboot it here and see if I can catch it real quick. Boot up off the disk. Let's boot up off the primary. And this is booting up off the virtual disk now. FreeBSD was deployed. Very painless, very simple, which is what I want. I don't want you to have to spend a lot of time on this, because installation is about the most boring thing there ever has been. We just want to get to doing some work and actually being productive. So there you go. That's most of the demonstration, but I do want to show you a whole bunch of how the installer works, how you can tweak and tune this to meet your own specific needs. So, first thing, of course you're going to want to customize this, right? My example is a neat little example, but most of you aren't going to be doing UFS on this. You'll probably be deploying ZFS, maybe you want your own installation archive, etc. It's impossible to adjust this entirely on the server side. It's very easy. So there's two key directories, which the utility mentioned at the end of its run there. They're all on the server here under home, thin client, and then install scripts is where we put our config scripts, and then install archive is where you can put system archives. So you may have your FreeBSD releases in there, your own custom rolled release, whatever you need. And then when you boot up the client, those are going to be NFS mounted under /install scripts or /install archive. Now the example file I provided, as you saw here, is fully functional. It runs. You can do a complete install with that. We also provide a default archive so that you can just kind of get your feet wet and start running with it right away. But it's a great way to use it as a template as well and customize it to what you need. So I'm just going to show you a couple examples of what the code looks like in the install config script and how we can customize it to do some different things. So the first thing, of course, which everyone's going to want is moving to ZFS. So, in the install script, you'll see we have a few lines here. These first 4 lines are what's in the example. We're doing a basic install with UFS, soft updates journal is on. We're setting up our root partition, giving it 1,000 megabytes, everything's in megabytes there. Some swap, we don't have a mount point for it. And then we're creating user, and because I set it to 0, it's just going to fill the remainder of the disk or partition or whatever is selected. Pretty standard stuff. So converting it to ZFS, though, is just a one-liner. All we have to do is change it from UFS to ZFS. Again, we're going to give it a 0 because ZFS likes to eat the entire partition or disk. And then we can then give a list of data sets. So we want to do / root, temp, user, var, etc. Yes?
Does that use MBR or GPT?
All right, question was, does that use MBR or GPT? Well, I haven't shown you anything in here yet to show you which one it's doing. I think the example is doing MBR, but that's just a single flag that you change, MBR, GPT, and then it manages all the logic in the background for you.
Sorry.
Yes?
Can the size be specified in percentage instead?
Question was, can the size be specified in percentage? Not yet, but that's a good thought. I should do that. Send me an email. I'll have it done before I get home, right? No, that would be cool. I have not set it up to do percentages yet. At this point, it's you can just specify megabyte sizes, and then you can give any of them 0 to say use whatever's left.
Another feature in this.
Uh-oh, and another.
CFS data sets.
Yes.
Implement parentheses so you can add properties to the
All right.
data set.
You just got ahead of me here. Maybe we already did that. But he was asking about doing data set properties. So yeah, we'll take a look at that here in just a second. So, no problem, no problem. I like getting questions. It makes it interactive. So feel free to interrupt me and ask whatever you like. That's good. So, the next example, okay, we've switched to ZFS, fine. But maybe we want to change the installation archive. Well, in the example, I've just said that the medium is just a local media. It's available under this directory, /install archive, which I told you about earlier. In this case, we ship usually everything in a big tarball for PCBSD, and it's just called FreeBSD release. So you could easily just adjust that, change the FreeBSD release to whatever particular one you want to install. So there's really no limit to how many of these you can have. You know, disk space will be the only thing that will stop you. Again, one line to change it to a different release. And of course, because it's an installer, we got to have cool stuff like user management. So, in this case, I've gone ahead and I've just said, hey, let's set up my root password. You can add users. There's a whole bunch of flags where you can really tweak and fine-tune the system through the installation scripts. The cool thing is, every single install you do with PCBSD disks, which I don't know if you have them in your bags, you here, or I know we gave FreeNAS ones, we do? Okay. Every single install you do with that installer is 100% scripted. There's no logic going on in the GUI that's doing magic. All it does is write a config script, and then the installer backend does it all. So any of these things can be tweaked and modified at will. And I'm going to show you that here in a second. So advanced commands, it even has support for running external commands or commands internal inside the chroot environment of your installed system. So say you've rolled a custom image and you've put some customized scripts in there which set up a web server or whatever it is you're doing. You can then tell the installer that you want to run that command before it finishes up. We can also run commands external. That'll be on the host, so that'll be outside of the installed environment. In this case, maybe I want to mount devfs inside the client for a moment because it needs to do some stuff with devfs. So a question I get asked, though, is about scalability. Well, all the CPU stuff's being done on the client. This isn't really CPU intensive on the server, obviously. The server is just a large file server running NFS and some stuff to make PXE work. So it's going to be mostly disk I/O and network speed dependent. And of course, we got to have another example of everyone wants to know, how do we do packages? Well, guess what? We can do packages. So we're just going to go ahead and say install packages in the config script. Just list them out, and it'll pull the packages from wherever your local directory was set to. We can use the short package names, or you can give the full version string, whatever. It's going to try and match it for you. Oh, I guess I had that out of order there. But yeah, scalability, another thing is the default DHCP server is configured for 99 clients, which is just a setting in the dhcp.conf. Feel free to adjust at will. Once it's set, we don't touch it again, so you're welcome to make changes to any of those configs. Now, putting the automated into fully automated. Well, say you want to just set up a system that sits there with a network cable on it, where you plug it in, go out and get a cup of coffee, come back, and you got an installed system. Well, we can do that as well. So all we're going to do is make a config script and just name it unattended.cfg. We put that on the server. As soon as you boot the client, it's going to come up and give you a 30-second warning. I'm about to blow away everything on this disk. And then it'll do the install, and it'll shut down when it's finished. Again, use this with caution, because if you don't label that network cable carefully and plug your boss's system in or something, you're in for a bad day. So that's my big caution. There's all kinds of warnings on there about this. I take no responsibility if you lose all your data. So, tips and tricks. This is the actual fun part. This is what I really enjoy, and I think the beauty of this system is shown here. The GUI installer is your friend here. Okay, so you're doing servers. You don't really care about all these GUI things. I understand. Why do you need GUIs on a server? But that DVD you guys have in your bag has a nice GUI installer, and boy, that is so much easier to set up ZFS with. instead of having to do it all by text and by hand and figure out data set flags, etc., the GUI will do all that for you and present you with a nice, clean config script. I'll show you that here in just a second. But what will happen is after you prototype an installation, say you do an install in VirtualBox, you set up the number of disks you're going to have on your servers, you can prototype the entire install in VirtualBox, do the installation. When you boot up, the script is saved in/root for you. It just takes the password lines out for security reasons. But everything else is there. So all your disk options, no matter how complex the script was, it's all there. You've prototyped it and you're now ready to go deploy that. And I'll show you how that works. Another tip and trick though is speeding up installations. I had some people ask me about that, and there's a couple methods I came up with, using ZFS mirrored drives, great, SSD, great. I even looked at one thing where I did it in tempfs. So I set the server, I made a huge tempfs directory and just copied my files into there and served them right out of RAM. That's about as fast as you're going to get. So what's next? Well, first of all, we're looking at some more improvements to PC sysinstall, the actual installation backend. I've already added support for doing disk file installation, so you can just point it at a FreeBSD mirror and it'll fetch their files and go to town. That's already in. It's not in 9.1, but it's in the next release. And of course, package NG support and new package format. That support is coming in the next release as well. And I've changed a little bit of how the thin client setup's going to work. You won't have to grab the ports tree anymore, etc. It'll just do all that for you. So, but before we get to questions and comments, I want to show you what I was talking to you about prototyping the system. So, okay, we're going to come over here. Yes, I like full screen. Oh, no, I don't apparently. Not if it's not on the right screen. Okay, oh, never mind. It's a nice thought. Okay. And in honor of us being in Japan, this is the first screen you're going to see when you pop that DVD into your VirtualBox or on your system. And I've been asked by a couple people, is it localized? Well, yes it is. So, if you want I know, it's 2013 and we can actually run in other languages. I'm so excited. But yes, it's localized. So the installation is very simple. I wrote this so I know where it needs to go in Japanese, so I'll walk you through it. So the first thing you're going to get asked is what type of installation you want to do. You can cycle through TrueOS or FreeBSD. You can customize them all, etc. So FreeBSD, why not? So come up here and ask me some questions. Root password. Test is a good password. And then a username. And I like Kris, and test is again a good password. And that's host name, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, my Japanese isn't that good.
Host name.
Oh, host name, okay. Alright. FreeBSD box. There's options for configuring your network interfaces. I just leave it on auto DHCP and IPv6. All that'll just be handled automatically. But if you wanted to, you could go and specify your values. That'll get saved to the config. And then do you want source reports? Pretty standard FreeBSD installation. Great. Now here's the fun part though, doing disk setup. That's what everyone wants to see, right? So it's going to go ahead and give you what it detects as the best suggested for your system. In this case, we've found ZFS, and we base that on if you're running on 32-bit or 64, and how much memory you have. So I believe if you have more than 2 gigs, it's going to suggest ZFS for you. But we want to fine-tune that. So I have 3 modes here. Basic, which is just very simple for we're a desktop operating system, so we got a lot of Windows guys coming over who don't even know what UFS and ZFS are. So basic would be the route we'd tell them to go, just click your partition and go. But in this case, we're a little more tech-savvy crowd here, so we're going to go advanced. And then the last one is FreeBSD Experts mode. That's for FreeBSD gods. If you know gpart and all the zpool commands and want to do that, you go for it. But even I never use that one. So, not going to happen. But it's going to ask me, what hard drive do I want to install to? Great. We're going to go ahead and pick that hard drive. ZFS, again, somebody had asked me about GPT and MBR. It's just an option here. Click GPT, MBR. If you have multiple disks, if it attests that you have enough, it'll open up the ZFS options for doing mirroring or RAID Z, and you can just change the mode, click the drives you want to include in the mirror, done. How simple is that? Didn't have to know a single command. But in this example, I only have one hard drive. Encryption, I don't care about at the moment, but if you want to encrypt the disk, great. That'll set up Jelly for you and do all the disk encryption as well. Now here's what Paul was asking here. ZFS dataset options, and yes, we can do ZFS dataset options. So I'll come here and say, okay, I got my dataset, and then I can right click and add different options all on the fly, and it's going to generate the script for me. So I forget what I pick here. So we'll say compression, maybe I like gzip, I don't know. Great, whatever. Maybe I want to come add a new data set. So I'll come down here and we'll do /data. Great. Let's set some options. So do we want compression? Yeah, why not? Okay, so I've just added another data set. Wonderful. It's going to give me the summary. Here's all the options you picked. Finish. And at this point, the script's actually been generated. It did it all in a split second there. I don't want to go through the whole install and make you wait, so I'm going to just show you really briefly where the temporary script got saved. So, this is the entire installation script. It was just created by the GUI for you. In this case, we've done a dist file installation, host name, we've set up our networking, which is just automatic. We've told it to localize, so if we want to... Sorry. That was totally intentional, right? Okay. So, we've gone ahead and set up our disk here, ADA 0. The entire partition is going to be used. We're using the BSD boot manager, and we're doing MBR, so you can switch that to GPT if you'd like. Partition. So all that complicated ZFS stuff, it went and generated the line for me with all the data set options. It's all there. So if you don't want to know what they are by hand, don't. I mean, I wrote this and I can't remember 2/3 of it anymore. It's like I just do it through the GUI because I'm lazy and I want to enjoy my Saturday. So we're going to run a command to save the config afterwards. Fine. Root password test. There's my users I created. And then just some external commands I can run after the install, with nothing being done in between them because we're doing a FreeBSD server. So that's it. I've prototyped an entire system in just a few minutes. I mean, you saw here, this could have been a server with 12 hard drives and I was setting up RAID on it or something. It was that simple after I do the install, or I could just grab that script off of here, throw it on my PXE boot system and go. I'm done. So that could be a customer's order. You could be sitting there on the phone with them saying, you want this, 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 this. Okay, your script's done. We'll have that out for you, as soon as the hardware's ready.
You tell them it takes 1 week to write? No,
Yes, you tell them it takes a week, right? Charge them more. There you go. We won't, that's not being recorded, right? Can we erase that? But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I wanted to show you guys how unique this is and how it works with both the graphical installer and then the PXE boot system. So I will be happy to answer any questions if you guys have any. And what was that?
You're killing my job.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm killing his job. Well, I'm sorry. I want this easy. But are there any questions, guys? No questions. Okay. Oh wait, never mind.
Is there also support for multiple ZFS pools?
The question was, are there support for multiple ZFS pools? Yes. So you could go ahead and add other disk blocks to it. So you could come up here and, we start with disk 0. We could also make a second section, disk 1 equals, and then we'd go down here, and disk 1 equals another ZFS, and that would set up another pool for you. So that's done automatically.
How about spares and ZIL devices?
Spares and ZIL devices, not in there yet. That is something we would like to do, but some of the options you could add host install, I left out of the installer for simplicity's sake, but if need arises, I can go ahead and code those in for you. So, I believe you had a question, sir?
So if you want PXE boot some other OS, like Linux or OpenBSD or NetBSD, how do you do it?
So the question was, how do you do other PXE boot
Yeah.
systems, Linux, whatever? Honestly, I'm not a huge PXE expert, so I'm probably not the best one to answer that question. I had a guy at a Linux show who told me his long, complicated config and how he did it, and I'd forgotten it all. So,
So you can basically just do that in the DHCP configuration files, and you can specify them by the MAC address,
Yeah.
and then a different server and all that.
But I want to choose which OS to boot. Like,
yeah, see, he had some complicated solution for that where it loaded some intermediary and
Yeah,
then
you'd
fired off
you'd
the
have to
kernel.
write an OS to do that.
Yeah, that was a lot more complicated. That's why I haven't touched that.
my solution is using Gravity.
Yeah.
Yep, you just grab or something, correct. All right, so are there any other questions? If not, let's go enjoy dinner. Thank you guys so much.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why PCBSD 9 version is two section install language twice language selection. Why change this? If in this demo, first language select as Japanese, but if this install is finished and reboot, more another Japanese selection to Japanese. Why?
Oh, okay. So the question is about the install of PCBSD. Why do we ask the language selection twice?
Yes.
We asked that for OEM installs. That was a request we had for an OEM vendor where they were doing the installation. I think Spanish was what they spoke, but they sold it to English clients. And so they would use the installer in Spanish because that's what their tech was comfortable with. But when then they gave the system out, the first time it boots, the person who's going to use it could say, I want English instead. So that was the reason why it asked twice, more like an OEM.
But I think this is just very rare case.
Well, maybe we can fix that in the future. But send me an email or create a track ticket if you'd like to see that functionality change. Cool. Thank you guys.
Thank you.